Hello everyone. Today I'm going to share with you a glimpse of the Indian Income Tax Act 2025. We have all heard of the old Income Tax Act 1961 with over 6 decades reigning in the Indian economy and with over 4,000 amendments. This act is all set to be replaced by the Indian Income Tax Act 2025. What we need to observe is why this change was mandated. Were there only procedural changes, structural changes, or there is a bigger picture? Let us have a glimpse of it. Hello. As we discussed that there has been a new era in the taxation of India. The Income Tax Act 2025 replaces more than a 60-year-old law. Overview of the Indian Income Tax Bill 2025 and why it was introduced. Let's look at the changes. Why was there a change required in the Income Tax Act 1961? So point number one, it was complex. A lay person would find it very difficult to understand the bare Income Tax Act, the provisions laid therein. Secondly, a high volume of litigation arose because there was lack of understanding of the act, and there was also a lot of ambiguity that resulted in the lack of understanding of the act. Then people found it difficult to interpret the language of the act. For example, a may or a shall would mean different things as interpreted by the act. The other reason was that there were many outdated provisions which needed to be wiped out. There were too many sections, more than 800 sections and more than 43 chapters in the Indian Income Tax Act, and also it was difficult to understand the Income Tax Act. And therefore, the Income Tax Act of 2025, it received President's assent on somewhere in August 2025, and this will be operational beginning from 1st April 2026. Now let's look at few of the changes in the new Income Tax Act 2025. Why this change? As I already discussed, that the 1961 Act, the language, the vocabulary was complex. It was difficult to understand. It led to a lot of litigation and ambiguity. And there were a lot of outdated provisions. The new Income Tax Act 2025 comprises of just 536 sections as against the 800 plus sections in the old Act. Likewise, it has just 23 chapters, unlike 40 plus chapters in the old Income Tax Act. Now, the main objective of the Income Tax Act 2025 is to bring in simplification in such a way that even a common man will understand the Act in a simple and a clear way. And that is why they have introduced a lot of tabular formats, unlike a lot of theoretical content. So it will bring in more clarity. Of course, no major tax rate changes have been made, but it's going to accommodate the modern economy. So the digital framework has also been introduced here in the new Income Tax Act. And we believe that this simplification, this clarity is going to reduce the dispute systems. It will minimize legal disputes. Of course, there is digital integration, faceless assessments, and taxation of virtual digital assets, which is also included in the Income Tax Act 2025. So the key highlights of the Income Tax Act 2025 are: 1. Simplified language. Second, structural changes. As we mentioned, that there are just 536 sections in 23 chapters. New terms, it introduces a term called the tax year instead of previous year and assessment year in the old Income Tax Act. There is more clarity in provisions, and this has been brought about by the explanations being depicted through tables and formulas for tax calculations, and also this is a more taxpayer focused act. Another distinguishing feature, the old act had 5.12 lakh words, whereas the new IT Act has just 2.6 lakh words. There were 47 chapters, while the new act has just 23 chapters. Total sections in the old act were 819, while there are just 536 sections in the new act. 18 tables in the old act, whereas the new act has 57 tables. What remains unchanged is that there have been no change in the tax slabs. Keywords, phrases defined in court rulings remain unchanged. Certainty of tax law provisions for all, and the Income Tax Act only simplifies the existing Income Tax Act. It's not an act altogether new, but it simplifies and brings in more clarity to the old Income Tax Act. This is a comparison of the Income Tax Act 1961 and Income Tax Act 2025. These are all that we have already discussed. Okay. And so we have, in terms of framework, existing framework governing income tax in India, it aims to replace the 1961 Act with updated provisions. Tax rates, specific tax slabs and rates. There are revised tax slabs and rates reflecting the current economic situation. Income Tax Act 1961 provided deductions under sections 80C, 80D, etc. Here it modifies the existing deductions and introduces new ones. Then we have fixed corporate tax rates with some incentives in the old Act, whereas there are changes to corporate tax structures and incentives in the new Act. There are limited provisions with regard to digital transactions in the old Act, whereas there is an emphasis on regulating and taxing digital transactions. They have defined compliance requirements and penalties in the old Act, whereas the new Act has stricter compliance norms. Here, the international taxation, we had the basic international taxation provisions in the old Act, whereas new measures have been designed for global income and transfer pricing. In the new Act, we have a streamlined dispute resolution system for faster processing, unlike the old Act where it was time consuming. The restructuring of tax administration for greater efficiency has been done in the new Act, and strengthened rules to curb tax evasion and evasion has also been taken into consideration while designing the new Income Tax Act. Thank you for watching.